Hello my dear students. Today we will discuss about migration and porous border in South Asia. The focus of this lecture will be on the following objectives. Number first, what is migration? Number second, meaning of porous and open border. Number third, South Asia and spectrum of migration. Number fourth, trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants and South Asia. Number 5, regional and state specific initiatives strengthening of criminal justice response. Dear students, let us first begin about the introduction of migration. Migration commonly refers to the movement of people, basically relocating of people within and across the border. Factors, especially push and pull factors, determine why people are migrating. Pull factors attract people, whereas push factors force people to move. Migration is mainly a south-north phenomenon. However, south-south migration is large now. Migrations fall into several broad categories. First, internal and international migration may be distinguished from each other. Within any country, there are movements of individuals and families from one area to another, for example, from rural areas to the cities, and this is distinct from movements from one country to another. Second, migration may be voluntary or forced. Most voluntary migration, whether internal or external, is undertaken in search of better economic opportunities or housing. Forced migrations usually involve people who have been expelled by governments during war or other political upheavals, or who have been forcibly transported as slaves or prisoners. Intermediate between these two categories are the voluntary migration of refugees fleeing war, famine, or natural disasters. Human migrations within recorded history have transformed the entire aspect of land and continents and the racial, ethnic, and linguistic composition of their populations. The map of Europe, for example, is the product of several major early migrations involving the Germanic peoples, the Slavs, and the Turks, among others. And in the course of 400 years, from the late 16th through the 20th century, the Americas, Australia, Oceania, the northern half of Asia, and parts of Africa were colonized by European migrants. The overseas migration of Europeans during this period totaled about 60 million people. South Asia is the core migrant destination, and the region consists of Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Among these countries, India is dominating in terms of land mass, population, and gross domestic products. Also, India is much in demand as destination by migrants, as it shares a common border except Afghanistan, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. Let us now move to the meaning of porous and open borders. Porous means where the geographical border is not protected due to whatever constraint, and as a result, the friends or foes can come in unchecked. This situation is not a comfortable one for any country. On the other hand, open border means a country which is open to welcome foreigners through official channels. It could be graded on multiple levels. Number first, diplomatic for diplomats, for tourists through passport control channel, Similarly, default entry as in European Union, where the citizens move through the countries of EU without any documentation. South Asia and spectrum of migration, let us do an analysis. In South Asian conditions, migration is an important livelihood strategy. Wage differences across the country are a core point. Almost all the migration is happening because of the development gap across the region. People choose a country as a destination where vast opportunities and a secure livelihood is available. The main pull factors are economic opportunity, affordable health service, educational opportunity, and social influence. On the other hand, the push factors are lack of employment, discrimination, and poor socio-economic condition. The dominating migration trends in the South Asian region are mainly temporary migration, student migration, economic betterment, and remittance. The main push factors for migration in Afghanistan are lack of decent job opportunity, wage disparity, poverty, high population growth, political instability, lack of security, and drought. People migrate to seek employment for socio-economic and security conditions. Wage disparity is also considered for labor migrants among surrounding countries. Due to conflict and political instability, people migrate to the neighboring country, mainly Iran and Pakistan. Migration between these regions is temporary and cyclic in nature and also prompted by high wage and stability. Instability, destruction of infrastructure, industry, and houses are driving the migration. Moreover, drought also forces people to migrate in search of livelihood. Many migrants came back to seek seasonal work during harvesting periods. Migrant workers from other countries are working in the construction industry. Labor migrants from Pakistan and Nepal are working in Afghanistan. The main pull factors of Maldives are demand for workers, tourism, and high wages. On the other hand, environmental concerns such as climate change and disaster are the main push factors. People migrate internally to seek education and employment, and internationally labor force to support the tourism and construction sector. Outmigration of this country, that is Maldives, is very low. Education is the only reason behind outmigration, and people migrate abroad for tertiary education. Maldives has become a destination point for significant numbers of migrants from India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh due to its high wages and employment opportunities. Construction, community service, and tourism are the main job opportunities for these migrants. The main push factors for migration in Nepal are poverty, unemployment, conflict, and natural resources. The migration flow is witnessed mainly from Nepal to India due to free border crossing without having a visa and passport. Political instability and lack of employment is a major driver of outmigration. Demand for the labor market is also a core driver for outmigration, and large-scale people migrate overseas due to these factors. Temporal and permanent labor migration occurs from Nepal to India and Malaysia. They migrated to India and engaged in agricultural work, population of Nepal consists of foreign-born citizens. Therefore, people from different countries like India, Bhutan, Pakistan and China migrate to Nepal, indicating networking, marriage, work, business and study as a reason for staying in Nepal. The major push factors for migration in Sri Lanka are civil war, unemployment and underemployment, lack of access to resources. Both skilled and low skilled people pushed for migration due to long civil war, conflict, lack of employment, low per capita income, high inflation and lack of access to resources. These migrants increase significantly. However, Sri Lanka becomes a destination point for tourism and education, but on a very small scale. Only foreign tourists and students come and stay for a short period of time in Sri Lanka. In Bhutan, the main pull factors for migration are economic activities and national security. Basically, Bhutan is a migrant receiving country. Progressive growth in the education system and economy and experiencing growth in hydropower and construction sectors that decrease dependency on agriculture. Internal labor shortage and high wages are pulling foreign workers, in which most are from India. The out-migration of this country is minimal. Mostly students are migrating to pursue tertiary education on merit-based scholarship. They migrate mostly in India as well as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Thailand, UK and other parts of the world. Most of them return, but some take advantage of job opportunities. Very few are seeking job opportunities and move to India due to better economic prosperity. Mostly, migration happens from Bhutan to India and India to Bhutan due to its free movement permission without visa and passport. The main pull factors in India are economic opportunity, better and affordable health service, educational opportunity, and social influence and networking. Also, lack of employment for high-skilled people, discrimination is major push factors for migration. India is prominent to be a net out migration country where low skilled, high skilled, also student migration occurs. Low skilled workers migrate to neighboring countries including the Middle East, whereas highly skilled workers migrate to developed countries and sometimes settle there. Student migration is another phenomena. Students tend to go abroad with student visas and become permanent residents after completing their study. Also, India has the largest migrants from neighboring countries based on foreign-born population. These populations are mainly from Bangladesh, Pakistan and Nepal. Economic disparity is the major cause of migration from poorer countries to India. Social networking and linkage are also a reason. Large number of Nepal and Bangladesh migrants working in India. Irregular and undocumented migration also happens. Free movement and porous borders are one of the major causes of this irregular migration. Pakistan's slow economic growth, high unemployment, inflation, security, instability, climate change, and natural disaster are the main push factors that trigger internal and cross-border migration. Pattern of out migration is basically short term and temporary. People who get an opportunity to migrate to a developed country, especially in Europe or America, are planning to stay and settle themselves there with their family. Low-skilled laborers migrate to developing countries or neighboring regions to work temporarily. Temporary laborers from Pakistan seek to migrate in the Middle East region mainly. Wage disparity plays a critical role to migrate abroad. Majority migrant workers are working in constructed areas as they are low skilled labor. In terms of in-migration, a lot of refugees and displaced people from neighboring regions tend to migrate to Pakistan, especially from Afghanistan. Due to conflict and political instability in Afghanistan, people fled and crossed the border and entered Pakistan. They also spread in urban areas to seek employment and worked as low-skilled labor. The major push factor for Bangladesh is the high rate of unemployment and low wages. Out migration occurs as temporary labor force migration. People seek to migrate especially to Middle East region and also neighboring country India. Workers from Bangladesh seek employment and work as low-skilled labor. People who lack basic education and have not got the opportunity to develop their skill tend to go abroad as low-skilled labor. This migration pattern is temporary as they are not allowed to stay as a permanent resident, so that they have to return back to their origin. Majority of people choose to migrate to India because it is easier and cheaper than any other country and earns better. Fragile border and social linkage are playing a vital role to migrate India. Student migration also takes place to some extent. Students seek to migrate abroad for their higher study. Bangladesh is leading in the race of labor sending countries due to its low-cost labor, but some in-migration takes place from neighboring countries because of kinship and porous borders. A major in-migration occurs when people from Myanmar cross the border and enters Bangladesh. These refugees are known as Rohingya. Remittances play a vital role in a country's economy. Remittances indicate the pattern of out-migration. High remittance indicate high out-migration of that country. Majority of remittances come from low-skilled laborers that are migrating abroad. It is an important contributor to the economy and combat unemployment, reduce poverty and improve their livelihood and wealth. Now moving to another part of the lecture, that is trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants and South Asia. South Asia comprises countries that are source, transit and destination countries for trafficking in persons, for sexual exploitation, forced labor, organ removal, etc. The region comprises socio-economic inequalities and intense internal migratory flows. The reality in many instances being open and porous borders between some countries of the region. Growing economies combined with corruption, weak criminal justice system, unequal law enforcement capacities offer opportunities for organized crime to thrive. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime (UNODC) Global Trafficking in Persons report of 2016 states that about 88% of the detected victims in South Asia are trafficked domestically within this region. Open and porous borders within the South Asia region have eased trade, but they also pose a challenge for border guards and immigration officers in detecting, identifying, and reporting incidents of trafficking in persons. When victims of cross-border trafficking in persons are detected, it is critical to have efficient and timely mechanisms of information sharing between countries, so that victims can be rescued and traffickers arrested immediately. Key cross-border challenges in South Asia include vulnerabilities faced by these populations due to poverty, gender discrimination, and gender-based violence, including as driven by conflict, natural disasters, the re-trafficking of victims, lack of awareness about human trafficking at the borders, insufficient knowledge and skills among border control law enforcement officials to identify victims of trafficking, and inadequate number of safe shelters at borders. Another challenge faced in the region is also the lack of willingness to cooperate, either bilaterally or regionally, between some South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation member states. The region also faces an increase in child trafficking for the purposes of bonded labor, domestic servitude, child marriage, illegal adoption, pornography, and the expansion of the use of the internet across the region has enhanced the ways in which sexual exploitation of children can occur. Although the region records most instances of trafficking in this region for the purpose of forced labor and sexual exploitation, there have been increasing media and anecdotal reports regarding new and emerging forms of trafficking in persons for the purposes of forced surrogacy, fraudulent marriages for the purpose of exploitation, sex tourism, forced begging, medical drug testing for organ removal, etc. While most countries in the region have some legislation in place to criminalize commercial sexual exploitation, exploitation of children, forced and bonded labor, some lack provisions and procedures for dealing with trafficking in persons as a criminal offense and as comprehensively as the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its supplementary protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons foresees. Also, among criminal justice and law enforcement authorities, there is not yet sufficient experience in detecting and investigating cases of trafficking in persons or in international cooperation through mutual legal assistance and extradition. Cross-border trafficking in persons between Bangladesh, India, and Nepal brings with it the additional challenge of how to repatriate the victims. On numerous occasions, victims are rescued, but due to lengthy legal and bureaucratic procedures, it can take years for the victim to be repatriated to their home country. The three governments have expressed a strong need to bolster regional and cross-border cooperation to address challenges of rescue and repatriation of vulnerable women, children, and men that are trafficked across the borders. Referral mechanisms are needed to protect trafficking victims from being exploited further. while educate data from government collated sources for information related to the smuggling of migrants is still lacking. UNODC's recent assessment under Global Program on SOM and Global Action Against Trafficking in Persons point to a close link between the smuggling of migrants and irregular migratory flows in South Asia. Thus, for instance, evidence shows that the majority of the migrants smuggled through Central Asia come from South Asia, especially from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Evidence-based knowledge on migrant smuggling and irregular migration is both scattered and weak. There is no regional reporting system or mechanism in place yet. Let us move to regional and state-specific initiatives in South Asia about migration and trafficking in persons. Since 2013, UNODC in South Asia has responded to trafficking in persons and the smuggling of migrants through the implementation of various initiatives, including country-specific projects in Bangladesh and Bhutan, and 2 regional initiatives covering Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, aimed at strengthening cross-border collaboration and cooperation to counter trafficking in persons. Under these projects, guidelines and SOPs on facilitating repatriation of victims of cross-border trafficking, scaling up referral mechanisms for protection and assistance to victims were developed, and a workshop on trafficking in persons for organ removal was organized in Nepal. Now, strengthening of criminal justice response. Much of UNODC's working on human trafficking centers on strengthening the criminal justice response by helping countries to develop legislation, institutions, and effective law enforcement. Under a partnership with the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs, capacity building activities in 5 states of the country included training of police officials and prosecutors, setting up anti-human trafficking units, establishment of networks among law enforcement agencies and civil society partners, as well as development of resource tools and training aids that were used by law enforcement officers throughout the country. Under this partnership, the launch of 9 anti-human trafficking units and training of over 14,000 law enforcement officials contributed to an increased awareness of the issue, skill enhancement, better interagency coordination, and victim witness protection. Considering the efficacy of anti-human trafficking units in addressing human trafficking in a holistic manner, the government of India replicated this model under their anti-human trafficking scheme. As a result, a 20% increase was recorded in registered human trafficking cases between 2009 and 2010. In April 2014, UNODC launched a regional trafficking in persons project. The project was jointly launched by the governments of Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. The project ended in September 2017. The project aimed to, number first, strengthen victim referral and protection mechanism in beneficiary countries. Number second, design and implement measures to prevent cross-border trafficking. And number third, improve cross-border cooperation among relevant actors for rights-based repatriation of victims. The project produced a number of outputs, including number first, guidelines for putting in place a regional referral mechanism, report on cross-border human trafficking, vulnerability and support service assessment, documentation of existing good practice prevention programs in the three countries, comprehensive information, education and communication materials. 3 NGOs, one each in a border location in the 3 project countries, were supported. Altogether, 1,022 victims were extended support and aid in the 3 countries. In India, an NGO in Assam was supported. Between June-July 2017, UNODC was requested by Indian Border Security Force and Sashastra Seema Bal to provide technical assistance to conduct training workshops for their forces. IEC material developed under the project was shared with them for wider use and dissemination. In addition, SSB invited UNODC to technically support them to organize a large-scale public awareness event at key hotspot district called Sonbarsha, located at the Indo-Nepal border in the state of Bihar. Well, dear students, in this lecture, we discussed about migration and meaning of porous and open borders. We also discussed the spectrum of migration in South Asian region. Additionally, we also talk about the human trafficking and smuggling of migrants in South Asia. Furthermore, we also discussed the initiatives at regional and state level to address these problems, like setting up of anti-human trafficking units. Dear students, I hope you had enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.